A lot goes into making a video game, such as time, energy, and most importantly, for the purposes of this list at least, money. Unfortunately, not all developers are quite as flush with cash as they'd like to be, and development costs sometimes exceed the financial limitations of a game's creators. Luckily, the coffers are never truly empty, because there's almost always a host of kind-hearted fans willing to give generously in order to see a game through to completion. The advent of Kickstarter and other similar crowdfunding platforms quietly revolutionized the industry, providing a means for fans to directly contribute to the development process. By donating their own hard-earned cash, these people assisted smaller studios with development costs, effectively becoming investors in the resulting game's success. Not all crowd-funded games are well received, and not every Kickstarter has the desired effect, but for this list, we're once again looking at the ones that worked. These titles only came to be thanks to the generous donations of fans, and they were all very much worth the money that was kindly donated. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 more of the best Kickstarted video games ever. Number 10. Friday the 13th, the game. Crowdfunding isn't just for obscure indie games, even established IPs sometimes need the help of the fans. Originally, developer Illphonic intended to make a legally distinct horror game based on the Friday the 13th film franchise titled Slasher Volume 1 Summer Camp. But after being offered the rights to the series, the game soon evolved into a more direct adaptation of the films themselves. The combined total from Friday the 13th the game's crowdfunding was over $1.2 million from a little over 30,000 backers, enabling Illphonic to properly invest in the game's development. The resulting title makes use of asymmetrical multiplayer horror, with one player cast in the role of notorious hockey mask enthusiast Jason Voorhees, and up to 7 others playing roles as camp counselors. The basic idea is that the prospective victims must evade their would-be killer, setting traps and escaping before he can violently end their tenure as counselors. Friday the 13th combines all the thrills of your average slasher movie with the abject terror of being stalked by a huge, seemingly unstoppable murderer. Part of its charm is in its replay value, with the various roles and avenues of gameplay making each visit to Camp Crystal Lake like a brand new entry into the film franchise. Just not the one where Jason goes to space. That would be silly. Number 9. We Happy Few. Modern life is stressful, and sometimes all we want to do is slip into a nightmarish drug-addled dystopia to remind ourselves that it could be far worse. Back in 2015, developer Compulsion Games had exactly that thought, and opened a Kickstarter for We Happy Few. Apparently, plenty of other people wanted to join them in the fictional town of Wellington Wells, and their crowdfunding efforts were a resounding success, raising over $266,000 towards development costs. During development, Compulsion Games was acquired by Microsoft, and money was no longer an object. The resulting game is a unique one to say the least. Set in an alternate timeline in which Nazi Germany managed to successfully invade and occupy Britain, We Happy Few takes place in the remote town of Wellington Wells in the 1960s. The residents, known as Wellies, are all chemically dependent on joy, which suppresses unhappy memories and induces a state of euphoria that changes the user's perception of their surroundings. It's not just the intriguingly unique premise that makes We Happy Few worth playing, though. It's a game that blends multiple genres, combining the feel of an RPG with stealth, light survival horror, and some roguelike elements. And the depth of its disturbing world is more than enough to warrant exploration, making We Happy Few an experience like absolutely no other. Number 8. Octodad, Dadliest Catch. After a group of university students found massive and somewhat unexpected success with their game Octodad, some of them wanted to do it again. 8 of the original team of 18 formed the developer Young Horses and set about making the sequel, but on a tight budget, they needed help. Thanks to Kickstarter though, the studio raised a little over $24,000 and started work on Dadliest Catch. With a world-class pun for a name and the continuation of the original original's hilariously absurd premise, Octodad Dadliest Catch follows the titular mollusk as he strives to maintain his cover while posing as an average suburban father. The sequel tasks the player with completing a number of relatively mundane chores and challenges, such as gardening and grocery shopping, all while controlling Octodad's awkward limbs. It probably goes without saying that Dadliest Catch is weird, wonderful, and ridiculously entertaining, but I just said it anyway. I like to be thorough. The game perfectly balances entertainment with difficulty, and somehow manages to establish a sweet and unexpectedly touching story, even as Octodad's limbs flail wildly in the foreground, which is all the more impressive considering the relatively minute budget Young Horses were able to develop it on. Number 7. The Bard's Tale 4: Barrows Deep. Securing the backing of the fans isn't always simple, but when your plan is to make a follow-up to a beloved but long-dead franchise, the task is considerably easier. Such was the case with The Bard's Tale 4, which sought to continue the story of a trilogy of games made during the 80s. In 2015, within 2 weeks of developer In Exile launching the Kickstarter campaign, it had surpassed its initial target of $1.25 million. A first-person fantasy dungeon crawler with RPG elements, The Bard's Tale 4: Barrows Deep picks up the story of The Bard's Tale 3 after roughly 200 years. Expanding massively upon the original trilogy's lore, the long-awaited sequel also massively overhauled the gameplay of its predecessors, adding in various modern mechanics and making use of the significant technological advancements made during the franchise's 30-year absence. If you're a fan of fantasy worlds or dungeon crawlers, The Bard's Tale 4 is certainly the game for you. Its labyrinthine caverns play host to all manner of fantastical enemies, making exploring its atmospheric world an unforgettable fantasy experience. After the franchise was mishandled for so many years, its triumphant return only came about due to the generosity of its fans, a feat of heroism about which bards will be singing for years to come. Number 6. ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove. Yet again proving that Kickstarter is a great way to revive beloved but dormant video game franchises, ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove also came to exist by way of a contingent of generous fans. The campaign to fund a new entry into the ToeJam and Earl franchise was led by series creator Greg Johnson and raised over $500,000 in just a few short weeks. Despite being the first game in the franchise that Sega had no involvement in, Back in the Groove featured gameplay reminiscent of previous titles. In many ways, the sequel was designed to play much like the original game, including the use of a fixed isometric viewpoint and gameplay involving searching various layers of floating islands. It also borrowed one or two elements from the sequel, Panic on Funkotron, including the rhythm-based Jam Out minigame. Back in the Groove wears its biggest selling point on its sleeve. It's a throwback to the quirky charm that made the franchise so popular in the first place. Though it's maybe a little too niche for new players, Back in the Groove perfectly recaptures the unique vibes of the original game for returning fans, and it also resolved a 17-year ToeJam and Earl drought that future generations will one day speak of only in hushed tones. Number 5. Kingdom Come: Deliverance. In 2014, 4 full years before its release, developer Warhorse Studios launched a Kickstarter campaign to raise 10% of Kingdom Come: Deliverance's $5 million budget to prove to investors there was enough of an audience for the game. In its first full month, the campaign had raised just shy of $1.5 million. Now, we're no business experts, but that seems like a resounding thumbs up from fans. Leading up to its release, much was made of Kingdom Come: Deliverance's meticulous historical accuracy and innovative gameplay mechanics. Set in Bohemia in 1403, players are cast in the role of Henry, the son of a blacksmith, who survives a raid on his village by foreign mercenaries. In true RPG fashion, he sets off to join the war effort, and players can engage in all the fun and revelry of the 15th century Czech Republic. Kingdom Come: Deliverance somehow manages to feel truly unique despite being classic RPG RPG fare. Though it features all the swords, horses, and shiny armor one might expect from a game of its ilk, its interesting and occasionally unorthodox approach to combat, exploration, and narrative progression are as refreshing as they are punishing. Though it might not be everyone's cup of bohemian ale, it's a delightful trip into a historical era we never even knew we wanted to visit. Number 4. The Banner Saga 3. As a franchise, the Banner Saga actually started with a very successful Kickstarter campaign. After 3 developers left BioWare to form Stoic Studio, they relied on crowdfunding to make their gorgeous tactical RPG inspired by the animated works of Ralph Bakshi and Don Bluth. The success of the first game naturally warranted sequels, and for the Banner Saga 3, they once again asked their fans for financial support. Those fans obliged, raising more than double the initial $200,000 target in just 2 months, roughly 1/4 of the game's total $2 million budget. Stoic hoped for the Kickstarter to not just supplement the financial side of the Banner Saga 3's development, but also to establish a dedicated community of enthusiastic beta testers. The resulting game rounded out the Banner Saga trilogy in emphatic fashion, proving massively popular with both critics and fans. Its truly breathtaking art style and tactical turn-based combat continued the trilogy's trend of rich, immersive gameplay, providing a conclusion to an utterly beautiful and remarkably unique RPG. Though we could have just as easily included the original Banner Saga in this list, the final chapter of the trilogy just about pipped it to the post with the critics. Whether you prefer the first, the third, or even the second though, I think we can all agree that the entire trilogy is an experience like no other. Number 3. FTL Faster Than Light. When considering some of the biggest video game successes to come from Kickstarter campaigns, FTL Faster Than Light is usually very high on the list. In 2012, the concept of crowdfunding a game was still in its infancy, and it was actually something of a last resort for 2-man indie developer Subset Games. Partway through development, they realized their ability to self-finance the game wasn't going to work. Their original Kickstarter target was a respectable $10,000, but due to the hype surrounding FTL at the time, it ended up raising over $200,000. Inspired by numerous popular sci-fi franchises, FTL Faster Than Light combines real-time strategy with the feel of a tabletop board game. Tasking players with commanding a spacecraft as it flees an overwhelming hostile force, FTL manages to balance complex strategy with relatively straightforward gameplay. Developers Matthew Davis and Justin Marr wanted players to feel as though they were in the spacefaring boots of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, or presumably other comparable sci-fi heroes, and FTL does just that. With a crew to command, limited resources, and a whole galaxy of bloodthirsty space soldiers to evade, FTL is both incredibly punishing and singularly rewarding, and it's one of the finest examples of the power of Kickstarter. Number 2. Hollow Knight. Interestingly enough, our number 2 pick on the previous list was also taken by a crowd-funded indie title featuring a specific type of knight, but this time we're swapping shovels for, well, being hollow. When developers Team Cherry set out to make a game inspired by older platformers that replicated their own childhood experience for a modern audience, there was no way of knowing they'd make an instant classic. Taking cues from Mega Man X, Metroid, and Faxanadu, Team Cherry conceived Hollow Knight, a Metroidvania-style platformer set in the underground world of Hallow Nest. In 2014, Team Cherry opened a Kickstarter with a target goal of $35,000. Though it may be a modest sum compared to many games, it was thought that it would support the hiring of an extra developer. Hollow Knight, in fact, raised a total of $57,000 from just over 2,000 backers, allowing Team Cherry to hire not just a technical director, but also a composer. Hollow Knight is a thoroughly striking game in practically every sense, and it's undoubtedly one of the most atmospheric titles ever released. Its dark and shadowy art style perfectly complements its premise, and its gameplay impeccably evokes the platformers of old with a modern twist. And number 1, Divinity Original Sin 2. When setting out to make Divinity Original Sin 2, developer Larian had already had some experience with Kickstarter. The first game, the original Sin as it were, had raised about $1 million towards development, so Larian once again asked the fans for their generous support. Naturally, they obliged, and Divinity Original Sin 2 met its initial target of $500,000 in just 12 hours. In fact, these fans were so generous that the game even reached some of its stretch goals quicker than Larian could actually announce them, and over $2 million was raised in total before the Kickstarter campaign ended. The very grateful developers explained that the Kickstarter enabled them to expand on their original vision, as well as solicit input and opinions from the community during the development process. That extra $2 million, and fans' opinions of course, made for a very successful game, and Original Sin 2 reviewed even better than its well-loved predecessor, earning a number of perfect scores from critics the world over. It's probably worth mentioning that Original Sin 2 is generally considered one of the greatest RPGs ever made, with praise leveled at near enough every aspect of the game. And to think it might never have existed were it not for the generosity of the fans.